Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name's Val. I work on the marketing team here at TPL. We've got Steve, who I'm sure you all know, on the call today as well. And we've got Sarah Vickers from Sicon, who I will hand over to in a second, and she will take you through the session this morning on Sicon Approvals. Just before I do that, a little bit of housekeeping. The lines are all muted at the moment, just so that everyone can hear the presentation nice and clearly and we avoid any background noise and so on. That said, if you have a question, please feel free to pop it in the chat during the session. I'll keep an eye on those and we'll cover them off towards the end of the presentation. I will also open up the lines, so if there's anything that you'd like to ask Sarah or one of the TPL team, please feel free. Okay, so with that, I'll hand you over to Sarah and we'll get started. Thanks, Sarah.
Lovely. Thanks, Val. Good morning, everybody. So the purpose of today's session is to run through a couple of applications for you to help you get the most out of Sage 200, really. So we're going to concentrate on documents, which is a very simplistic application that allows you to store any type of document inside of Sage, as well as our full-blown OCR document automation. And then we're going to dip into our invoice approval module, and we'll touch on all of the other modules that are available within the approvals portal as well. So without further ado, it would help if I actually shared my screen. So let me come and share my screen. Bear with me 2 seconds. Val, can you just confirm that my screen is coming through okay? So yeah, perfect. That's lovely. Thank you. Right, so bear with me 2 seconds. Let me make sure I am actually, no, I'm not sharing the right screen. Sorry, bear with me 2 seconds. I've got too many screens open. Would help if I actually shared the right one, wouldn't it? Bear with me. Right, that's Sage 200 screen I need to share. Right, so have I got the right one? Let me make sure I'm sharing. That's perfect. I'm definitely sharing the right one now. So, as I mentioned, we're going to start off with documents. And what we're going to do is we're going to process an invoice. We're going to show you how we can attach a document, but I'm going to concentrate initially on the full-blown document automation. And then we'll dip into how the basic version of document works, whether it's inbound documentation or outbound distributing of those documentations. Then, as I said, we'll dip into the invoice approval module and we'll kind of scoop up anything else for you. So first and foremost, documents just basically sits as an integrated module inside of Sage 200. So as you can imagine, the purpose is really about being able to store any type of documentation within inside of Sage 200. That could be a customer's purchase order against a sales order. It could be something against your nominal ledger, against your cash book. It could be something as simple as images or some specifications against a stock item as an example. So as I mentioned, all I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with document automation. So we're going to process some invoices. So the way that document automation works, and let me just come into, just to give you an example of the kind of things that we can do in the background, I'm just going to come into a standard Sage supplier account on the purchase ledger. Now, essentially, what we do initially is we set up document automation to work for every single supplier in your purchase ledger. But as you can see, you can then decide which of those suppliers you want to disable. So clearly you're going to have some suppliers like maybe your staff supplier account because it's an expense account as an example. That's a typical example of one that you're probably not going to want to use for document automation purposes. So you'll see we can disable specific types of suppliers. Now the next thing that we can do is we can then decide which of those ones we need to validate certain bits of information. So you'll see if you've got suppliers where you always want to validate a purchase order or GRN, or for those of you who have got projects, then we can also do validation against projects as well. So it's essentially saying when we get an invoice in, what is it that you want the system to check and flag if it hasn't got that certain type of information. So if you do have certain suppliers like utility bills as an example, clearly you're not going to have a purchase order for those, so we don't need to be checking that as an example. Now, the other thing that we do is we set up a scoring system, and this will make a little bit more sense for you in a moment when we come and run the solution. Essentially, what we do is we set up a scoring system that checks, is it a valid supplier in the first instance, and a couple of other things. So you say, well, I might want to check 3 things as an example in order, again, to validate that A, it's a valid supplier in the purchase ledger, but also there's a couple of other things that we'll check. Now, it's like a child, as you can imagine, we've got to teach it in the first instance where to look for information. So all we're basically doing, as you'll see when we come and train the system in a moment, is we're teaching it where to look for the invoice or the purchase order number. So as you'll see, I don't have a training model set up for any of my suppliers at this moment in time. Now, there's a couple of ways that we can get invoices in, and this is the document automation module that you'll see. And as I mentioned, this is, that's the benefit of ours, is that it sits as an integrated module. So as I mentioned, there's a couple of ways that we can get invoices in. So typically what most companies will do is they'll get an email address set up, their internal IT department will set that up for them, and their suppliers will send invoices through directly to that email address, and that can be credit notes as well, by the way. And then all we're simply doing is we're then uploading those into the system. That's obviously the easiest and quickest way of managing this. The second way, which is what I'm going to show you today, is I can upload these from a network scanner. Or indeed, if you do still unfortunately have suppliers sending you paper invoices, obviously, as you can imagine, we can't read a paper invoice. So essentially what you'd need to do is scan that in and save it as a PDF, and then you'd be very simply be able to upload it into here. So what you're looking at here, as I mentioned, this is the document automation module. So we have the various tabs at the top, and they're just essentially just giving me the information about, is there any validation and what is it? So the first one is just simply saying it's ready. Everything is validated, it's all processed okay. We're ready to hit Sage with the attached stored electronic document. The next one, as you'll see in a second, will show me that there's certain things that need attention. Where we've asked the system to check for a GRN, because we do have purchase orders that we want to check against, it will check here and it will show up if we haven't got a GRN, whether that's coming from purchase requisition approvals in the portal, or whether of course that's directly done inside of Sage. If it's not validated, it'll flag in here, and as I'll show you later on, we can also lock one of these invoices down with a query so nothing can go into Sage itself. Now, I can filter on any one of those options. So if I want to filter by a certain supplier or by specific documents, and it's worthwhile mentioning that this system can also help you to convert customer purchase orders into sales orders. So for any of you who do get a lot of customer purchase orders, rather than you having to manually key those into sales order processing, we can do that conversion for you. Now, I'm not going to do that today. We'll concentrate on purchase invoices, but it's essentially the same format. So all I'm going to do is we'll load some invoices, and we'll show you a couple of examples this morning. We'll show you an example where we're matching a purchase order. So we're matching the invoice to a purchase order, and we'll also show you another example where no PO, it's just a purchase ledger invoice, but there's no supplier on Sage. So we'll show you a couple of examples. So there we go. No training template. So this is where I've now got to teach it. So straight away when it loads, it's recognized the supplier, and indeed if I come to the account, there we go, there's that scoring system that I was talking about earlier on. So it's recognized it's the supplier, and it's showing which element that it's matched for me. Now it's showing that it needs attention, and if I come to the validation here, this is why it's not checking it. So let's come and do a bit of training. Now, as you'll appreciate, the reason why we need to do the training is the system's not going to know where to look for the data. And we need to do this against each individual supplier because, as you're all aware, each supplier has a tendency to put their information in different places. So, one supplier might put an invoice up here and another one might put it down on the far left-hand corner. Now, even if your supplier has a tendency to keep moving where they put the information around, don't worry. You can create as many training templates as you like We don't override the original one. So if they put information in different places, the system will just look for all those different places that it could be to validate it, and then it will process it accordingly for you. So all we're going to do, as you can see, it's as simple as saying, right, there's the invoice number, there's the invoice date, and as we mentioned, I've got a purchase order number, so I've asked it to validate it, order number, and then all we're doing is we're saying that's the net value, that's the VAT, and then finally that's the total value even. And we're going to create now a training model template. So the next time we get an invoice coming through from Ernie Swinton, it knows exactly where to look for that information. So I'm going to quickly process another one in a second. There we go, that's valid. And then as I'll come and show you in a second, we can then either process that automatically, which again go straight into Sage with the attached electronic document, or we can process it manually, which means we'll go into standard Sage, and then that gives us the flexibility to do a little bit more processing around it. So we'll come and show you those two in a second. I just want to show you how quick this learns. So I'm going to process another invoice now. So all it's doing in the background now is it's looking at that training template that we've just created. And then once it's checked the training template, as you'll see in a second, it will come up. So let's close that. There we go. How quick did that learn? So I haven't had to key all of that information in for a second time. Now, appreciate there's going to be obviously some effort up front in order for this system to know, but you can see how quickly that's trained it. But as I mentioned a moment ago, it could be that they've moved the purchase order number to a different place. You don't have to teach it everything again. You're just simply showing them where that PO is in a different area. Now, I mentioned that we can process this now in one of two ways. So I can either process this automatically, and that will just post to Sage, and we'll come and show you that attached document in a second. So that's now processed. The second way, for those of you who perhaps want to change nominal accounts or might want to add additional documentation, or if you have any of our other modules like intercompany or fixed assets as an example, this then gives you that added benefit of processing it as you would do normally inside of Sage, but of course without having to enter all of that information. So you'll see again the benefit of it sitting inside of Sage is that that's a standard Sage invoice matching screen. But this is now where I can, if I need to process it as an intercompany invoice, I can do. And again, if I want to save this invoice as a fixed asset, again, I can do. But as I mentioned, if I want to change the nominal accounts, again, I can do all of that if I wanted to. And again, for those of you who have projects, if I want to split it against multiple projects, I can do. Now you'll see that it's defaulted to requires authorization. So I've set every invoice up that it needs to go out for authorization before it gets released for payment. So if you're just using this for invoice approval, then that's probably the best way to work. I'll come and talk about matching of purchase orders and how we can manage that later on for you. So this is, as I said, this is me just simply processing it in the normal way. And again, that's now completed. Now, the benefit of having this sitting inside of Sage 200 is that I can do one of a number of things. The first is that I could view or amend the order. So this is now taking me straight into the standard Sage screens. So I'm not having to come out of these screens. And there we go, there's the PO. The second thing that we can do is we can drill down to see the transaction inquiry screen, the supplier. So again, standard Sage screen. And as you'll see, we've also got the ability to add documents and view documents at this stage. And again, that could be any type of document. We'll come and talk about the basic version of documents later on. Now, the other thing, as I said, that we can do is we can drill down to see the transaction inquiry screen. So let's come and show you that attachment that we had through processing those two. So there we go. there's the 2 invoices that we've just processed, and we just simply have an extra column that says document count. And if we come to that line, click on view documents, there we go. There's that good old Ernie Swinton invoice that we've just attached. So no paper trail, no storage and filing cabinets trying to retrieve them. It's all stored in one place to easily retrieve that. And once we've posted that, that will then be viewable in the nominal ledger as well for you. Now, I mentioned that we have the very basic version of documents. So this is where I could, if I wanted to, attach additional documentation, and that could be any type of documents. And you can name them anything you like as well. Now, at this moment in time, because I've got my invoices set to require authorization, you'll see that it's locked it down with a U for unauthorized. So if we were to run our suggested payments routine, it's not going to appear in that. So we'll come on and show you in a second, we'll come and show the invoice approval and then how it automatically releases it back in Sage for you. Right, let's come on in to documents automation. Let's come and show you another example, which is the example of we have a purchase ledger invoice this time, but there's no supplier set up. So technology partners have sent me an invoice, although they didn't know they sent me an invoice, Steve. Oh, I don't, there we go. So no supplier. And again, if I come to accounts, there's no match, 0 score. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly copy that email address so I have a contact. And if you bear with me, I'm going to come to Standard Sage Purchase Ledger and I'm just going to quickly add on Technology Partners now as a new supplier account, as of course you would do if you were setting up any supplier account. So tech and technology, if I can actually spell technology, it would help. And then we're just going to simply add for speed that email address. So what I'm also going to quickly do though is I'm just going to quickly change the settings on that one because I want to say don't worry about checking a purchase order number, don't worry about checking a GRN because as I alluded to, we're only just doing this as a normal purchase ledger invoice. So let's come and change that and we'll say we don't need to validate any of those. We're not doing GRNs, we're not doing projects, otherwise it's not going to validate correctly. There we go. So we've set up a new supplier account in the normal way. And if we now drop back into document automation, you'll see that if we come to the account now, there we go. We've got a score of 1 and we've got a match of that email address. So we can now do exactly the same as you saw me do a second ago, which is simply invoice number, whiz down, date of invoice. Again, obviously I don't have a purchase order number, so all we're going to do is net value, VAT value, and our total gross. And then all we're doing, again, save and train, and then that's going to create my training model this time for technology partners. And any second now it will read as valid, and then what I'll do again is just upload. There we go, that's valid. And again, I'm just going to upload another one very quickly for you, just again so you can see how quickly the system learns. So just uploading again, it's looking for that training template in the model, in the model training template in the background. And there we go. How easy is that? Right, I mentioned we can do a couple of other things. So the first is we can mark this as a query. So it could be that, as is the case here, everything is checked out. Okay, it's all valid, but I don't want it to go into Sage just yet. So I've just got this little query where all I'm doing is going to lock it down. I can pop in a note. I don't know, awaiting information. I can even sign it to a member of staff that's using documents and document automation inside of Sage to pick this up, mark it with a query, and there we go, it's now flagged as query. So we can't process it, as I said. And then all I do when I'm happy with that, I clear the query, clear, and then that will be available then to post into Sage. So essentially that is document automation. It is as simple and it is easy as that. Clearly the advantage is hopefully you're seeing this morning is that it's provide you with a mechanism to get your invoices, get your credit notes, potentially your customer purchase orders directly into Sage without having to constantly keep manually keying all of those in. So massive time saving involved. And of course, reduction of errors as well, keying that information and data in. Right, we've processed the documents. It's hit Sage. The next stage, of course, is we need to authorize those. So this is where we're now going to go into our approvals module. Now, approvals is basically an integrated module that connects to Sage without the need for a Sage license. So all of your users are essentially approvals users. Now, we'll come into the desktop version today, but there is a mobile app as well that can run on an Android device or an iOS device. Just to manage expectations, the desktop version is a live environment. For the moment, the mobile app isn't a live environment. You do have to sync it, so that will push and pull new data back and forth. But we are developing at the moment an online version to be released at some point next year. Let's show you the desktop version. Right, I'm going to basically log in and you'll see that there are various modules on the left-hand side. So the purpose of the approvals portal is that it's made up of all of those different elements. As I mentioned, we're going to concentrate on the invoice approval module this morning, but it's worthwhile mentioning the other things that you can do as part and parcel of the same platform. So the first is purchase requisition. So if you need to raise a purchase requisition and you want that to be approved, you need to check budgets, send budgetary information to your budget holders without having to produce reports. All of that is essentially visible through the portal. So it's a really good way of being able to have visibility of what your staff has spent rather than having to wait for the invoice to come in. It's also, as I said, a really good way of managing that spend against budgets as well. So that's purchase requisitions. But for those of you who might have our projects module as well, so I know Johnson's, you've got, Michelle, you've got our projects module as well. There's the ability to raise project requisition. So rather than having a purchase requisition that's linking, if you want to send, as an example, a list, perhaps staff, I don't know, you've got staff project site managers that literally just want to create a quick list of things that they want to order, then that can be done in the projects requisition, and then the office can decide which supplier they're going to send that requisition through to. We can do sales quotes, sales orders, and sales returns, and all of those linked to standard Sage, SOP quotes, SOP orders, SOP returns. And similarly, by the way, the purchase requisitions module also links to standard Sage purchase order processing. So of course it eliminates again that need to key in the data and then having to key it in again in standard Sage. Obviously we're going to concentrate, as I said, on invoice approval this morning for you. There's also the ability to submit expenses, approve them. That will post onto the purchase ledger, although it doesn't have to. If you pay via payroll, we can do it that way as well. And we can also capture those costs opposed to a project as well. So Michelle, conscious that you've already got some of our approvals modules, but you've got projects. If you've got staff on site that you want to capture those costs, that can do two things at the same time. It'll post, as I said, the cost to that person's supplier account on the purchase ledger, but we can also capture those costs onto the projects module at the same time for you. So you're seeing all of your costs at the end of the day attributed to that project. Of course, if you don't have projects, we can use this in a normal, typical purchase ledger way, and we can also manage company credit cards as well. Timesheets, again, Michelle, one for you, probably more so. So where you've got staff traveling to site, and again, you want to submit timesheets for costing purposes, maybe capture of payroll for overtime purposes, or even charging back to the customer, all of that can be done through the timesheets module. Holiday requisitions, pretty self-explanatory. I'd like a holiday, please, especially with this cold weather and snow at the minute. So I'm going to submit a holiday request. That's going to go to my boss. Once that's fully approved, that will then automatically post into Outlook for us. So we then have a meeting appointment in everybody's diary that then, of course, everybody can see. But we can also check if other people are off at the same time. So in our team, obviously we need to make sure that we've all got cover at some point. We can't have the whole of the team off at the same time. So we get a pop-up to check other people to say this might not be approved because my colleague Michelle, as an example, is already off in that period. HR and absences. So a very simplistic mechanism to record typical company policies, staff's accidents, staff emergency details, their name and address, their contract information, accidents, typical absences, so recording absences and any disciplinary action and any approval meetings, that kind of typical HR stuff. But again, with the ability to generate absences. And again, once that's approved, that also will go into the Outlook diary as well. Now, again, Michelle, for your purpose and benefit, as you've got projects already as well, there's the ability for your users to see their projects and be able to look at budgets and revise budgets and see all of the transactions from a work in progress perspective. So there's an awful lot in the portal, basically. And of course, your staff will only see the modules that you've purchased, but also the modules that you want them to have access to. So as an example, if you've got staff that you want to raise, I don't know, timesheets and expenses, but you don't want them to approve invoices, then they won't see those in the menu option on the left-hand side. Right, let's come back to the invoice approval module. So all that's happened in the background, as you saw in the Sage screen a moment ago, we had that little tick box that said needs approval. So that's automatically now raised that as an email notification out to whoever needs to approve this. And this actually could be multiple people. So as you'll see later on, we can set up an approval workflow on various different configurations. So in my case, I've now logged on as Sarah. Sarah would have had an email notification with a little hyperlink in it to tell her that there is an invoice awaiting her approval. We can even consolidate those email notifications. So if managers are getting a lot of those, we can consolidate them. We can send through reminders if they haven't done it after a period of time. And we can even escalate it to somebody higher up the chain if they still haven't done it after a certain period of time. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my, sorry, I've just realized I'm in requisitions instead of invoices. It would help if I go to the right area. Right, let's click on invoices. And you'll see now it's going to populate through all of my invoices, including the ones that we've just submitted. So we've got all of our invoices in here, including those last ones. And you'll see we've got various attachments. So there we go. There's those two that we've literally just submitted. So again, no paper trail, no having to email invoices out to staff and wait for them to come into the office as an example. So there's my Ernie Swinton invoice that we've just shown. I can approve all or reject all. Now, approve all is the only action that will change that setting back in Sage and take it off that U for unauthorized. And once everybody that needs to approve it has done so in here, that's when it will release it. So when you then run your standard Sage suggested payments report, that's when it will be available. I can reject it and I can pop in a reason as to why I'm rejecting it, and usually the rejection will go back to finance just to warn them that it's been rejected. But I can also pop it on hold, and I always think this is a really useful one to save your suppliers from constantly hassling you. I can also let other staff know, by the way, if I have put it on hold, so and I may be letting the finance know that I've put it on hold. Again, this doesn't change anything back in Sage, by the way. So you'll see it's automatically pulled up with the email address of that supplier. We can CC in somebody else, and it's just telling them that it's on hold, and it's telling them the reason why it's on hold. And then all we do is we click send, and that will then just simply email it out through to the supplier. When we're then ready to take that off hold, all we simply do, as you can imagine, if I come back into it now, is literally unhold it. And again, all that will happen, so you can see on that right hand side, it's ticked it to show me that it's on hold. So if I now do an unhold, that's just going to simply send an updated email address now to the supplier telling them that it's not on hold anymore. So that's now taken off hold. And obviously at this point now, we can just simply approve it. Or if we wanted to, we can just tick all of them and we can approve all. So I'm going to approve that. And that's, as I said, where if it needs to go through to more people, of course it will do. That could be based on the value. That could be based on the supplier, or it could be based on the nominal cost center departmental code. So as I said, I'll come and show you some examples of that shortly. So that's it. It's as simple as that, now sitting back in Sage. Now, as part and parcel of that same module, we've also got approved payments. We don't charge any more money for this. So for those of you who perhaps do this inside of Sage at the moment, or you print off a report, you don't need to do any of that anymore. You still run your standard Sage suggested reports, but the difference being, as you'll see here now, is again, it will automatically email whoever is responsible for approving payments, but you'll see that that information will now populate through into the screen. So I have all of my suppliers, and again, I have my attachments, but I think the biggest benefit of all of having this pulling through into here, other than of course not having to produce a printed report anymore, is that I can then drill back to see the attached invoices. Where, of course, in a suggested report in Sage, you don't get any of that information. So if I scroll down here, you'll see I can then see all of my invoices if I still need to do that. I can, of course, approve it. Or if I scroll down, wow, I've been really lazy and I've not done a lot, I can approve all. Or I've still got the flexibility, as you'll see now, to edit those payments, those suggested payments, and I can change them if I wanted to. So if I don't want to release the whole value of what's been suggested to me, I can still edit it and I can still change it. And then, as you'll see in a second, again, I can approve all, I can release all, I can hold. So when it's loaded all of those, so it's got a lot, as you can see, a lot of invoices to load with the attachments. You'll see in a second that it will give me that ability to be able to edit it. Now, there is also, I'll come and show you in a second, an out of office functionality for those users that perhaps typically do approve those, but we'll come back and show you that in a second. Right, so there we go. If I do need to change the value, I've still got that flexibility to do exactly that. And if we whiz down, there we go. That's where I was saying you could pay none, pay all, or approve all. And that's essentially where it'll just pop it back into Sage, and then you just do your normal bank's payment routine as you're doing at the moment. So essentially all we're doing is we're taking the element of having to produce a report and pushing it through to here with, as I said, the added benefit of being able to still see the attached invoices. Okay, right. I'm going to finish off on two last things. I'm going to just show you an example of an approval workflows just so you can see the kind of things that we can do. And then we'll just dip back in very quickly to the standard documents and just finish off again and show you the other kind of things we can do in documents. So you'll see, dependent upon the modules that you purchase, you have the ability to set up different approval workflows based on each of those different types of documents. So if we come back to our invoice module, for those of you who have perhaps different companies, this can work with as many company data sets as you like. Again, we don't charge any extra for that. And again, you can have an approval workflow based on your company data set. Now, I've got mine set up for an approval workflow based on my nominal cost center departmental code. But as I mentioned, that could be by projects, it could be by supplier as an alternative. And all we're doing here is we're simply saying when an invoice comes in with that associated nominal cost center departmental code, these are the people that you need to go through to for approval. And as I mentioned before, you can have as many people as you like. We don't limit the number of people that it can go through to. All I've done in the background is I've set up each of the approvers with their own maximum limit. And in my option here, it's just going to go through to one person at a time. Now, I could, however, have it set that irrelevant of the value, it's always going to go through to both people if I make them mandatory. Or I could have it set that it's going to skip Sarah if it's over her value and go straight through to the administrator. So that's just a very simplistic way of setting up an approval workflow. But we've got a slightly more advanced way of working where it can go through to multiple people at the same time. So it could be that it goes to the line manager in the first instance, but it can then be triggered to go to maybe multiple people in the finance department. Any one of them could pick it up. But aligned to that, you have what we call sorry, I had a complete mind blank there. My mind just went to mush. You've got the ability to set up levels, basically, of values. So essentially you say, at what point do we need more people to sign off on it? So out of maybe 5 people that we've sent it through to, if it's only a value of £100, as an example, it only needs one of those 5 people to approve it. But if it's £1,000, then maybe 2 out of the 5 need to sign off on it. So you set up your different levels, and alongside that, how many people need to sign off on it, and essentially that's what we look for. So as I said, that's a more of an advanced way of working. Now, I mentioned earlier on that there's also the ability to do an out of office. So it's just a very simplistic way of covering those absence periods, whether it's sickness or holiday leave. So rather than having to set up a brand new approval workflow to cover those instances, either an administrator can do this on my behalf, or I can go in myself and I can choose somebody else. And all that then happens is that anything new coming in or anything that's already in the system will just simply reroute through to that new designated person. And then very simply, when I'm back, I switch it off, and then it just simply reroutes back to the original designated person. So that's approvals. Right, let's finish off, as I said, with the standard documents module. So let's just let's just dip back in. I'm having trouble in talking now. I'll put my teeth back in. So the way that document automation works is that you need a standard documents license as a minimum. Now, the standard documents license comes in one of 2 formats. So you've got what we call a scan and view, and that, as you can imagine, gives users the ability to literally scan and attach a document and view it. And then you have a view only license. Now, I mentioned earlier on that you can attach, you need a PDF in document automation, but when it comes to the standard documents module, there's the ability to attach any type of documents. So that could be, as an example, if I come to my stock list or a nominal ledger as an example, and I come to my espresso machine, I could attach an image against it. So you'll see in here, you'll see I've got a little add documents. So you'll see I've named my different type of documents, but as I mentioned earlier on, you can call these anything you like. So I can say I want to attach a product specification, and then I can either have a paper document, pop it in a desktop scanner, click scan, and that will automatically attach it. Or as I've just done, I can go to a network scanner or a folder, and I can then just simply attach it in here if I wanted to. And then that just simply attaches whatever I have, whether in this case it's an Excel document, a JPEG, Word document, all of that can be then saved accordingly. So that's just a very basic version of our documents module. But as part and parcel of that, we also have the ability to do outbound documentation. So this is document distribution. Now, I've come into this stock item because I've got a perfect example against my espresso machine of something that we send out. So dependent upon which of our modules you use, and of course dependent upon which of the modules that you use inside of Sage, there's the ability to attach additional documentation when you send any one of these out. So in my example, I've said when I send an order acknowledgement out, I always want to send an image of the coffee machine. But as I said, that could be some instructions, it could be a manual, it could be specifications, it could be anything that you like. So of course, Standard Sage gives you the ability to email documents out, whether it's a sales order acknowledgement or a purchase order. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't give you this added benefit of attaching additional information. So that's an example of a stock item. But if I come back to my documents module just for a second, if I come to the right place, you'll see that I also have the ability to, sorry, I'm just looking for the right place because we've moved it and I'm just trying to see, where is it? Can't see for looking. Sorry, we've moved it and I can't see where it is. Where's it gone to? Where have you gone to? Where have you gone to? Documents, that's why, because I'm looking in the wrong place. Purchase order, automated settings. Where have you gone to? Settings. Sorry, I can't see for looking. There we go. I'm looking completely the wrong place. I think I need new glasses. There we go. Right. So in addition to those images or whatever else that it is that you want to send out, there's also the ability to say, okay, when we do send something out, where are we sending it through to, or who are we sending it through to? So in my case, I've said, when we send a purchase order out, I want to send it to the purchasing manager. And that's just picking up the email address that you've got set against the role directly inside of Sage against the account. We can also say, what do we want to do when we automate this? Do we want it to go automatically? Do we want to email it? Do we want to send immediately? Do we want it to go into our drafts folder? And then you'll see I've also then got the ability to have a header page, preview page, a background page, as well as terms and conditions as well. So these again are just examples of things that you can automate attaching all at the same time. And in true Blue Peter style fashion, as they used to say when I was a kid, and I'm showing my age now, you'll see, oh, here's one I've prepared earlier. So if I come to my drafts folder, these are just some examples of ones that we've sent out. So there's a great example of a dispatch note, and I'm sending out an image of the espresso machine. Let's have an example of something else. What else have I got? So again, there's my purchase order. You can tell I like my espresso machines, can't you? So essentially, anything that we're emailing out, as I said, we can automate that process for you. And that can link to our other modules as well. So standard documents can link to our barcoding solution. It can link to our courier integration to automate dispatching, sending out the dispatch note and the courier tracking notes. It can link to our work sort of processing. So it starts to integrate, it links to projects as well, by the way, Michelle. So there's the ability to attach documents in the projects module as well. So I guess, Val, a good opportunity to open the session up for questions. I don't know if anybody has put any questions. Oh, there we go, Philip. There's a question, right. So just perfectly timed. Where was the question? I missed it, it's disappeared. Right, let me go back to the question. So, Steve, what happens if there are 2 pages to the invoice? Great question. So we only charge you in document automation per document. We don't charge you per page. So we'll read all of the pages for you. So that's the way that the document automation bundle works. So when you buy document automation, the pricing works on the basis of, as I mentioned, you need the scan and view licenses, you need the document automation module, and then you need the bundle. And if this is something, by the way, that you're interested in, Steve can give you a quote on. And the way that the bundle pricing works is it goes from 1,000 up to, well, we can go over 25,000 now. They never run out. So if you buy a bundle of 25,000 and that lasts you 18 months and you've still got 5,000 left, as I said, that won't ever run out. But it does work out cheaper the higher the bundle that you buy up front. So to come back, Steve, to your question, it doesn't matter how many pages in each of the invoices that you have, we charge you per document. But obviously, if you have an invoice from a supplier that they're two separate invoices, you'd need to have those separated because obviously we need to read them as separate invoices. Hopefully that's answered your question, Steve, but do come back if it hasn't. Philippe, can we have Sicon Approvals email out without Outlook and Office? Do you mean you mean Google or a different type of email? Obviously, we need to have an email to send it out, if that's what you mean, Philippe. So I'm just looking at your second part of the question. Does Sicon Approvals when doing expenses connect with Concur? No, we don't. I mean, you don't need Concur basically if you're using our expenses module, because essentially we're taking over from Concur, but essentially ours is a properly integrated module, unlike Concur.
Sarah, sorry, Sarah, just at this point, what I've done, I've unmuted, I've given everyone access to the mic again. So if you would rather,
Okay.
if
Yeah,
you would
no,
rather
that would be much easier, yes.
Obviously it's down to, you know, the person that's asking the question. If you would rather, just unmute yourself now and you can ask away rather than type. Totally up to you which way you want to do it. The
Yeah.
Q&A section in the chat is
Okay.
still
Let me just answer before I answer any questions that are being asked. Bear with me, everybody. Bear with me, Philip, so I can see your hand up. Steve's just got another question in the chat. Thank you, Sarah. With the 2 pages to the invoice, how does Sicon know where each field is when sometimes the total may be on page 2 rather than page 1? So again, as long as you've taught it on the system, Steve, it will then recognize where it needs to be looking for the information. So that's all part and parcel of the training. Okay. Philippe, sorry, did you have another question, or was that just from the original? Please
just from the original. Yeah, just from the original.
Okay.
So basically, one of the issues that we've come across is, so we're very picky when it comes to security at our company.
Okay.
Controls. So having a reliance on Outlook and Office has been an issue, and Steve Reardon can walk you into the details of that, or through the details of that. And the thing is that we're looking for a way to email out without having to use an Office license. So that means you can still go to an email server, just not the Office license, if you know what I mean.
Okay, so we need to connect to something. If you're suggesting maybe Google as an email as an alternative.
No, I'm talking Exchange. So if you go directly to our Exchange server,
to.
as opposed to
it needs
Outlook.
to, unfortunately. Yeah, we do need to have an Exchange license. So it needs to be Office 365 Outlook. We need to use that in order to email it out, basically. So quick answer then, Philippe, is yes.
So yes, so you actually have to connect to Outlook. I'm being very specific here, not Exchange. So do you need Exchange? Yes. Or Outlook? Yes.
It's starting to get a bit technical. Let me come back to one of our consultants, because that's starting to get a bit technical for me. Essentially, we need to connect to some form of email. So you're talking about Exchange or Outlook. To my mind, it's one and the same. But let me take that one offline and let me check that one for you, Philippe. Okay. So I'm just making a note so I don't forget.
And you can just connect with Steve. Steve will.
I will do. I'll relay an answer back for you, Philippe. Yeah, that's fine. Anybody else have any other questions? Everybody's being very quiet all of a sudden.
Well,
I don't know if
I was going
that
to say,
means
in the room, are there any existing Sicon Approvals users that
do. We have Michelle from Johnson's, who's been very quiet.
Hi, hello everyone.
Hello.
Are there any extras on there, Michelle and Felipe, that would be a benefit to what you're currently doing with your processes?
So, maybe, yeah, there's definitely something I'd like to talk to you about, Steve, around Sicon Approvals. But we'll do that separately.
Yeah.
yeah, definitely something I'm keeping my eye on, because we need to introduce a more robust processes, and I think Sicon can help with that.
I mean, I'm more than happy, because we've still got another 10 minutes or so, and I'm happy to carry on as far as Steve knows, as long as you want me to, really. If there's a general consensus that you'd like to have a look at some of the other modules, then for those of you who are interested, by all means stop on the session, and happy to carry on, or Steve can arrange for some one-to-one sessions for you. So please do shout out if you'd like me to carry on which modules you'd like to have a look at. I've gone to mute again. I think everybody's...
Sarah, is there any quick wins with the enhancement pack? You could just cover off a couple, just 2 or 3 of those. I know it's a bit sort of out there, because there's so many good things in there. Can you think any sort of off the top of your head that we can just sort of cover off?
Yeah, there's about 100 utilities too, so I can never... It's one of those, I always tend to look at the helping user guide, to be honest with you, because I can never remember off the top of my head. I always say it's kind of like a run seal advert. Just go to the website. So I guess what Steve is talking about is we have a pack called the enhancement pack. Basically, it's not an application in the same sense of document automation. It's not something that you can demo necessarily. So there's a lot of utilities basically that help improve Sage 200. So I guess some great examples would be, I'm just sorry, you've thrown a curveball at me there, Steve. Just trying to think off the top of my head of ones that might be quite relevant to people.
That's what I'm paid for, Sarah. So
yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Steve. This is why I can't remember, and I have a memory like a sieve at my age now. As I said, we've got about 100 different utilities, so trying to think of one off the top of my head. A great one that I always use as a great example is if you put a customer on hold, we prevent that from being dispatched. So it won't allow you to dispatch it. Another thing that we can do is if a person has put a sales order on with a 0 value, again, it'll pop up and it either won't let you save it, or again, it won't let you dispatch it. So that's another great one.
What about the cut and paste feature on order entry?
That's distribution. That's not enhancement pack.
Okay.
So the other one, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. That's it. The same example as the sales orders. You've got the ability to prevent purchase orders not being saved if they've got a 0 value on it. There's also the ability to store a customer stock code against your own. So if a customer has a stock code that's different to your own, you can store those alongside each other. And again, you can have as many different customer stock codes as you like against your own stock code. So those are just quick ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But as you can see, if you go to the help and user guide, it basically does what it says on the tin. So you've got the screenshot, and it's pretty self-explanatory as to what it does. So it breaks it down into the different modules inside of Sage. So I've just mentioned about the different price bands, being able to do an import export of price book. So there's various utilities that even if you use just 1 or 2 of them, it's definitely well worth the value at the end of the day.
Thank you.
So that's okay. Any other questions? Any thoughts? Sorry, going back to my original question. Anybody want to have a look at any of the other modules, or would you rather just liaise with Steve and get some one-to-one sessions set up?
Yeah, if everyone just can connect with me via email or give me a call, quite happy to set up one-to-ones. If you want to know the pricing, etc., of what we've seen this morning, just let me know, and I'll put it on an email to you.
Val, I think we've got some more sessions set up shortly, haven't we, as well? So
yeah, we've got a manufacturing session next week, and then a barcoding and warehousing session in January. The details are on our website, but we will email out with details on the sessions that we've got coming up over the next few weeks as well. So keep an eye out for those, everyone.
And as you can see on our website, we don't just do approvals, and as Val just alluded to, we've got manufacturing and we've got barcoding come up. Please do have a look at our website and of course Technology Partners website, because there's a whole host of applications that I'm sure will be really beneficial for you. And again, liaise with Steve and we can get some one-to-one sessions organised for you for those as well. But I hope this morning's been beneficial and useful for all of you. Relay any questions back to Steve, and as I said, if you want any more one-to-ones, just let him know. Okay.
I think the other thing just to mention as well is that the session was recorded, so if you want colleagues to have a look at what you've seen this morning, we'll send you the link and you can share it with whoever you want. Okay,
great. Thanks, Steve. Okay, thanks, Sarah. That's been really helpful. And thank you everyone for taking the time to join us this morning. As everyone said, any questions, please just get in touch, but I will forward out a recording as soon as possible to everyone, and hope to see you on another session. Thanks a lot, everyone.